The dusty streets of Hamilton, Nevada, hadn't seen a woman in traveling clothes that fine since the silver boom went bust 3 years back in 1875. And when Caroline Tucker stepped off the stagecoach with her leather valise and determined chin, every man loitering outside the saloon stopped mid-conversation to stare. She could feel their eyes tracking her every movement as she smoothed down her navy traveling dress, the fabric already gathering dust, despite her best efforts during the bone-jarring journey from San Francisco. The driver handed down her trunk with a grunt, letting it thump onto the wooden boardwalk hard enough to make her wince. Everything she owned in the world was in that trunk, and she couldn't afford to replace so much as a hairpin. "You sure about this, miss?" The driver asked, eyeing the ramshackle buildings of Hamilton with obvious doubt. "Next stage back to Carson City leaves day after tomorrow." "I'm quite sure, thank you," Caroline said, injecting more confidence into her voice than she felt. The town looked even more desolate than she'd imagined, and her imagination had been pretty grim based on her brother's letters. The driver shrugged and climbed back onto his perch. Within minutes, the stagecoach was disappearing down the rutted road in a cloud of alkali dust, and Caroline was alone on the boardwalk with her trunk and an audience of weathered, suspicious faces. "You lost, lady," one of the men called out from the saloon steps. Caroline straightened her shoulders. "I'm looking for the Tucker property. My brother Thomas owned a claim here." The men exchanged glances, and something in their expressions made Caroline's stomach tighten. A tall man in worn denims and a sweat-stained hat pushed away from the hitching post where he'd been leaning. Even from a distance, Caroline could see he was different from the others. Younger, perhaps mid-20s to her 21 years, with an honest face beneath several days' worth of dark stubble. "Madam," he said, approaching with his hat now in his hands, revealing thick brown hair that needed cutting. "Name's Cole Miller. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Thomas Tucker passed on about 6 weeks back." The words hit Caroline like a physical blow, even though she'd suspected as much when Thomas's letters had stopped coming. "How?" she managed to ask. "Mind collapse," Cole said gently. "He didn't suffer none. We got him out and buried him proper in the cemetery up on the hill." Caroline's vision swam for a moment, but she forced herself to remain upright. She'd come too far and burned too many bridges to fall apart now. "I see. Thank you for telling me, Mr. Miller. Can you direct me to his property?" Cole's brown eyes widened slightly. "You aiming to stay?" "That's precisely what I'm aiming to do." A laugh erupted from the saloon steps, and Caroline turned to see a portly man in a brocade vest descending toward her. Everything about him, from his oiled hair to his calculating smile, put her on guard. "Miss Tucker, is it?" the man said. "I'm Harold Daniels, mayor of what's left of Hamilton and proprietor of the Lucky Strike Saloon. Your brother's claim reverts to the town now that he's passed, seeing as you're a woman and can't work it proper." "That's not true," Caroline said sharply. "The Homestead Act doesn't distinguish based on sex for inherited property." Daniels's smile faltered just slightly. "Well now, that may be technically accurate, but let's be practical. You're a lady from the city, by the looks of you. These mines are dangerous for men who know what they're doing. A woman alone out here wouldn't last a month before you're begging to sell and head back to civilization." "I'll last as long as I need to," Caroline said. "Tell you what," Daniel said, his smile returning wider than before. "I'm a betting man, and I appreciate your spirit even if it's misplaced. I'll bet you $100 you won't last a month. When you give up, I'll buy the claim from you for a fair price and pay your passage back to California. Can't say fairer than that." More men had gathered now, drawn by the spectacle. Caroline could feel their amusement, their certainty that she'd fail. Part of her wanted to refuse the bet on principle, but another part, the part that had gotten her into trouble back in San Francisco, rose to the challenge. "I accept your bet, Mr. Daniels," she said clearly. "1 month from today, you can pay me that $100. Daniels laughed and several of the men joined in. "This I got to see. Boys, who else wants in on this action? I'm giving 5-to-1 odds she's gone in 2 weeks. Money started changing hands as men shouted out bets. Caroline felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. Let them laugh. She'd show every last one of them. "Madam, if you're serious about this, I can help you get your trunk out to the claim," Cole said quietly, his voice barely audible under the commotion. Caroline looked at him more carefully. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing or betting. His expression was serious, almost concerned. "Why would you help me? Your brother was a decent man. Only one who didn't laugh when my pa lost everything and drank himself to death 2 years back. Helped me get on my feet, gave me work when I needed it. Figure I owe him that much to look after his sister, at least until you get settled." Something in Caroline's chest loosened slightly. An ally, even one motivated by obligation, was more than she'd expected to find. "Thank you, Mr. Miller. I'd appreciate that very much." Cole nodded and hoisted her trunk onto his broad shoulder with an ease that suggested strength hidden beneath his lean frame. "Got a wagon around back. The claim's about 3 miles out, not much of a ride." Caroline followed him away from the jeering crowd, her head held high despite the fact that her hands were shaking inside her gloves. What had she just committed herself to? She'd never worked a mine in her life. She'd been a seamstress in San Francisco, living in a cramped boarding house and saving every penny. When Thomas's letters had painted Hamilton as a place of opportunity, she'd scraped together enough for the journey, hoping to start fresh where no one knew about her broken engagement to a man who turned out to be married already. Now Thomas was dead, and she'd just wagered her pride and her future on lasting a month in a dying mining town where everyone expected her to fail. Cole's wagon was a rickety affair, but the 2 horses pulling it looked well cared for. He loaded her trunk with care and then helped her up onto the bench seat before climbing up beside her. The leather was sung cracked, and the whole contraption creaked ominously, but it held. "Don't mind Daniels," Cole said as he guided the horses down the main street and out onto a narrow track heading into the hills. "He's been buying up claims cheap ever since the silver started playing out. Figures to make a fortune if the mines ever come back or if the railroad decides to run a line through here." "What are the chances of either of those things happening?" Caroline asked. Cole was quiet for a moment, his hands steady on the reins. "Honestly, not good. Most folks with any sense have already moved on. Those of us left are either too stubborn or too broke to go elsewhere." "Which are you?" A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "Bit of both, I reckon. I've got a small ranch about a mile from your brother's claim. 20 head of cattle, some chickens, a decent well. It's not much, but it's mine free and clear. Your brother used to come by sometimes for dinner. He talked about you quite a bit." Caroline felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. "What did he say?" "Said you were the smartest person he knew. Said you could sew a dress that would make a duchess weep and figure sums faster than any banker. Said you had more grit than half the miners in the territory." Cole glanced at her. "He wanted you to come out here, but he wanted to make sure he had something established first. A proper house, a working mine. He didn't want you to see him struggling." "I wouldn't have cared about that," Caroline whispered. "I know, I told him as much. But Thomas, he was proud. Wanted to prove himself." The landscape rolling past was harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Sagebrush dotted the hillsides, and distant mountains rose purple against the vivid blue sky. It was nothing like San Francisco with its fog and crowds and the constant smell of the sea. This land felt ancient and unforgiving, carved by wind and time into something both desolate and magnificent. "Here we are," Cole said finally, pulling the horses to a stop beside a small wooden cabin that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. Caroline's heart sank. The cabin was tiny, maybe 12 feet by 12 feet, with a sagging roof and gaps between the wall boards wide enough to see through. 100 yards away, a dark opening in the hillside marked the mine entrance, shored up with timber that didn't look any sturdier than the cabin. "I know it doesn't look like much," Cole said, reading her expression. "But the roof is sound mostly, and Thomas had started on some improvements before he passed. There's a good stove inside, and he just ordered glass for the windows, though it never arrived." Caroline climbed down from the wagon, not waiting for Cole's assistance. She walked to the cabin and pushed open the door, which hung crookedly on leather hinges. Inside was dim and dusty, but Cole was right about the stove. It stood in one corner, a handsome iron affair that must have cost Thomas dearly. There was a rope bed frame without a mattress, a table with one chair, some shelves and various mining equipment stacked against the walls. "The well is just behind the cabin," Cole continued, following her inside with her trunk. "Water's clean and cold. Thomas had started digging a root cellar too. And the mine, well, he thought he was close to a new vein. He'd been following a promising seam of quartz." Caroline ran her finger along the table, leaving a line in the dust. Her brother had lived here in this tiny, rough cabin, chasing dreams of silver, and he died in that dark hole in the ground, buried under rock and earth. "Miss Tucker, Caroline," Cole's voice was gentle. "You all right?" She turned to face him, and something in her expression made him take a step back. "I'm going to make this work, Mr. Miller. I don't care what Daniels or anyone else thinks. My brother believed in this claim, and I'm going to honor that belief. Call me Cole, please. And I don't doubt your determination, but do you know anything about mining?" "No," Caroline admitted. "But I can learn. I assume there are books on the subject." Cole rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, sure, but mining's more than book learning. It's dangerous work. The mine could collapse. There could be gas pockets, bad air, flooding. And even if you figure out how to work it safe, you got to know what you're looking for and how to extract it and how to get it assayed and sold." "Then I'll need a teacher," Caroline said. "Will you teach me?" Cole looked genuinely shocked. "Me, I'm no miner, I just have a small ranch. But you know more than I do, and you knew my brother worked with him. You must have picked up something." "I helped him shore up some timbers and haul ore, but that's about it," Cole protested. Caroline moved closer to him, looking up into his weathered face. "Please, I have no one else to ask, and I can pay you, not much, but something." Cole looked torn, his brown eyes troubled. "It's not about payment, I just don't want to see you get hurt. These mines, they've killed better men than me. Your brother was careful, and he still died down there." "Was it truly an accident?" Caroline asked suddenly. The question seemed to catch Cole off guard. "What do you mean? You said the mine collapsed. Was anyone else there when it happened?" "Were there witnesses?" Cole frowned. "No, he was working alone. That's not uncommon. Most of these claims are one-man operations." "Why? You think it was something other than an accident?" Caroline wasn't sure why she'd asked. Maybe it was the way Daniels had been so quick to claim the mine would revert to the town. Maybe it was the general atmosphere of barely concealed hostility she'd felt in Hamilton. Or maybe it was just grief looking for somewhere to land besides her own heart. "I don't know," she said finally. "I just need to understand what happened." Cole nodded slowly. "Tell you what, it's getting late and you've had a long journey. Why don't I help you get this place cleaned up a bit, get a fire going in the stove, and bring you some supplies from my ranch? I've got extra blankets, some food. Tomorrow, if you're still set on staying, I'll show you what I know about the mine. We can take it slow, and you can decide if this is really what you want." "I don't have much choice," Caroline said. "I spent every cent I had getting here. There's nothing for me back in San Francisco." Something flickered in Cole's expression, curiosity perhaps, but he didn't pry. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and set to work sweeping out the cabin while Caroline unpacked what she needed from her trunk. Her practical dresses, her sewing kit, the few books she'd brought, and at the very bottom, wrapped in cloth, a small framed photograph of her and Thomas taken 5 years ago before he'd headed west. She set the photograph on the shelf and stared at Thomas's young face, so full of hope and ambition. He'd been 24 in that photograph, just a year older than Cole was now. It seemed impossible that he was gone. "Got the stove going," Cole said. "I'll ride back to my place and get those supplies. You'll be all right here for an hour or so," Caroline nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole hesitated in the doorway, looking like he wanted to say something more, but then he just settled his hat on his head and left. She heard the wagon creak and the horses whinny, and then the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Alone for the first time since arriving in Nevada, Caroline sank down onto her trunk and let the tears come. She cried for Thomas, for her failed engagement, for the terrifying uncertainty of her situation, and for the sheer, overwhelming exhaustion of trying to be brave when she felt like the world had been pulled out from under her feet. But she only allowed herself 10 minutes. Then she wiped her eyes, splashed water from the bucket Cole had filled on her face, and set to work. If she was going to win that bet, if she was going to survive out here, she couldn't afford to wallow in self-pity. By the time Cole returned, his wagon loaded with supplies, Caroline had scrubbed every surface in the cabin, organized Thomas's mining equipment into sensible piles, and made a list of everything the cabin lacked. Cole stared at her handiwork in amazement as he carried in a feather mattress, wool blankets, a crate of food, and what looked like an entire dish set. "This is too much," Caroline protested. "It's not charity," Cole said. "Some of this was your brother's. He'd leave things at my place when he came for dinner. The rest you can pay back when you get on your feet or not. I don't need much." They worked together as the sun set, fitting the mattress to the rope bed, hanging blankets over the glassless windows, stocking the shelves with flour, beans, coffee, salt pork, and other staples. Cole showed her how to work the temperamental stove, and where Thomas had been digging the root cellar. "You've got about a week's worth of food here," he said. "There's a general store in town, but the prices are robbery. I can show you which plants are edible and where the best hunting is. Do you know how to shoot?" "I've never touched a gun in my life." Cole looked pained. "We'll have to remedy that. A woman alone out here needs to know how to protect herself. There's rattlesnakes, coyotes, and occasionally men who are worse than either." As full darkness fell, Cole lit the kerosene lamp Thomas had left behind. In its warm glow, the cabin actually looked almost cozy. Caroline had made up the bed with the blankets, and the stove radiated heat that pushed back the chill of the desert night. "I should go," Cole said. "It's not proper for me to be here after dark." "I don't care much about proper anymore," Caroline said. "But I appreciate your concern for my reputation." Cole smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, younger. "Your brother would haunt me if I damaged your reputation. He was very particular about that. Thank you, Cole, for everything. I mean it." "You haven't thanked me yet," he said. "Wait until after I've taken you into that mine tomorrow and you've seen what you're up against. You might change your tune." After he left, Caroline lay in the surprisingly comfortable bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the gaps in the walls, she could see stars, More stars than she'd ever imagined existed, spread across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional yip of a coyote in the distance and the settling sounds of the cabin. She thought about Cole's calloused hands and gentle voice, the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, nothing like the polished gentleman she'd known in San Francisco. There was an honesty to him that was refreshing, even if it came with dire warnings about her chances of success. Sleep came eventually, and with it, dreams of dark minds and her brother's voice calling to her from somewhere she couldn't reach. She woke to brilliant sunlight streaming through the blanket-covered windows and the sound of hammering. Disoriented, Caroline pulled on her wrapper and opened the cabin door to find Cole on a ladder, nailing boards over the gaps in the walls. "Morning," he called down. "Hope I didn't wake you, but I figured you'd want these holes patched before winter comes. It gets cold out here, cold enough to freeze water solid." Caroline was very aware that she was in her nightclothes, her hair unbrushed and hanging loose down her back. "I need to dress. Give me a moment." "Take your time. I'll make coffee." By the time Caroline emerged in one of her simpler calico dresses, her hair pinned up in a practical bun, Cole had not only made coffee but also cooked bacon and cornmeal mush on the stove. The domestic scene was so unexpected that Caroline stopped in the doorway, just watching him move around her cabin with easy familiarity. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Cole shrugged. "You need your strength if we're going into the mine today. Sit and eat." The food was simple but delicious, and Caroline realized she was ravenous. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Cole spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you asked yesterday, about whether your brother's death was truly an accident." Caroline set down her coffee cup. And I don't know. But I do know that Daniels offered to buy Thomas's claim 3 times and Thomas refused every time. Said he was close to something big, just needed a few more weeks. Then the collapse happened, and convenient enough, here comes Daniels ready to claim the property. "You think Daniels had something to do with it?" "I think Daniels is a greedy son of a gun who'd sell his own mother if the price was right," Cole said bluntly. "But causing a mine collapse, that's murder. I can't see him risking a hanging for a maybe profitable claim." "Unless he knew it was more than maybe profitable," Caroline said slowly. "Unless he knew exactly what Thomas had found." Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You've got a sharp mind. Your brother wasn't exaggerating about that." "What do we do?" Caroline asked. "We go into that mine, careful-like, and see what's down there. If Thomas really was onto something big, you've got more than pride riding on winning that bet. You've got a genuine future." An hour later, Caroline stood at the mouth of the mine in clothing Cole had scrounged from somewhere, sturdy trousers and a workshirt that had probably belonged to Thomas. They were too large, but she'd belted and rolled them to fit. Cole had given her a pair of heavy boots and a hat to keep dirt from her hair. "Stay close to me," Cole instructed, lighting 2 kerosene lamps and handing her one. "Watch where you step. If I tell you to run, you run and don't look back. Understand?" Caroline nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The mine entrance yawned before her like a mouth, and she had to force herself to follow Cole into the darkness. The temperature dropped immediately, and the smell of damp earth and rock filled her nostrils. The tunnel was narrow, shored up every few feet with wooden timbers that creaked ominously as they passed. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, an eerie rhythm in the oppressive silence. "Thomas was working the main shaft," Cole said, his voice echoing strangely. "He'd followed the vein about 200 feet in, then started a side tunnel. That's where the collapse happened." They walked deeper into the earth, and Caroline fought rising panic. The weight of the mountain above them felt immense, crushing. How had Thomas done this every day? How did any miner? There, Cole said, holding his lamp high. The side tunnel was blocked by fallen rock and timber. Someone had cleared enough debris to remove Thomas's body, but otherwise the collapse remained untouched. Cole set his lamp down and began carefully examining the rockfall. "Hand me your light," he said. Caroline passed him the lamp and watched as he studied the pile of rubble from different angles. His expression grew increasingly grim. "What is it?" she asked. "These support timbers, they didn't just fail. They were cut, part-way through, enough to weaken them but not enough to be obvious unless you looked close." Caroline's blood ran cold. "You're saying someone sabotaged the mine?" "I'm saying these timbers didn't break naturally. Someone wanted this tunnel to come down." They stared at each other in the flickering lamplight, the full implications settling over them like the dust in the air. "We need to tell the sheriff," Caroline said. "Hamilton doesn't have a sheriff anymore. Last one left 6 months back when the town couldn't pay his salary. Nearest law is in Carson City, 3 days' ride. Then we'll go to Carson City." Cole shook his head. "With what proof? The timber could have been damaged accidentally. Without a witness or a confession, there's nothing to prove this was anything but an accident. So whoever did this just gets away with it. They murdered my brother." Her voice broke on the last word, and suddenly Cole's arms were around her, pulling her against his solid chest. Caroline stiffened for just a moment, then let herself lean into the embrace. His shirt smelled like soap and leather and something indefinably masculine, and for just a moment she let herself feel safe. "We'll figure this out," Cole said into her hair. "But we have to be smart about it. If it was Daniels and we go accusing him without proof, he could make things very difficult for you, for both of us." Caroline pulled back, wiping her eyes. "You're right, I'm sorry, I just feel so helpless." "You're not helpless, you're here, aren't you? You took that bet. You're standing in this mine when most women would have fainted at the entrance. You're a lot of things, Caroline Tucker, but helpless isn't one of them." The way he said her name, soft and certain, made something flutter in Caroline's chest. She looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw the concern in his brown eyes, the strength in his jaw, the gentleness in his calloused hands that were still resting on her shoulders. "We should go deeper," she said, her voice not quite steady. "See what Thomas found that was worth killing for." Cole hesitated, then nodded. They carefully climbed over the rockfall into the side tunnel beyond. The passage was rougher here, less finished, and Caroline had to duck in places to avoid hitting her head. But then Cole stopped abruptly, and she nearly ran into his back. "Would you look at that?" he breathed. Caroline peered around him and gasped. The lamplight reflected off the tunnel wall ahead, glittering and gleaming like stars. The rock face was shot through with veins of silver, thick ribbons of ore running through the quartz like frozen lightning. "Is that what I think it is?" she whispered. "That's silver, all right, and unless I miss my guess, this vein runs deep." Thomas was right. He'd found something big. This could be worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands of dollars. Caroline's mind raced. Daniels must have known. He must have seen this somehow, or Thomas told someone who told him. "Thomas wouldn't have told anyone," Cole said with certainty. "He was too careful, but Daniels could have sneaked in here at night, seen what Thomas was working on, and decided to kill him for it." The words hung in the air, ugly and inescapable. Caroline felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. Her brother had died for this silver, murdered in the dark for someone else's greed. "We can't let him win," she said. "We can't let him steal this claim after what he did." "First we have to prove you can work it," Cole said. "That bet you made, that was clever in a way. It gives you time and a reason to stay without Daniels pushing too hard to buy you out. But you're going to have to actually extract ore, get it assayed, prove this mine is operational." "Then teach me," Caroline said. "Teach me everything Thomas knew." Over the next 3 weeks, Caroline learned more about mining than she'd ever imagined possible. Cole brought tools and showed her how to drill holes for blasting, how to shore up tunnels with timber, how to identify good ore from waste rock. They worked from dawn until dusk, and slowly, painfully, Caroline extracted her first samples of silver ore. Her hands blistered and bled, then calloused over. Her back ached from swinging the heavy hammer. Her arms trembled from hauling buckets of rock. But every day she grew stronger, more capable, more confident. And every day she noticed more about Cole. The way he always positioned himself between her and any potential danger. The patient tone he used when explaining something for the third or fourth time. The pride in his eyes when she successfully set off her first controlled blast and brought down a section of silver-rich rock. The careful distance he maintained, never touching her unless absolutely necessary, always treating her with respect even when they were alone in the dark mine. He brought her dinner most evenings, claiming he'd cooked too much for just himself. They'd sit outside the cabin as the sun set, eating and talking. Caroline learned that Cole's parents had been homesteaders, that his father's drinking had started after his mother died of pneumonia, that Cole had been just 17 when he'd buried his father and found himself alone in the world. "Thomas gave me work when no one else would," Cole said one evening, staring out at the desert. "Most folks in Hamilton looked at me and saw drunk Jim Miller's son, figured I'd end up the same way. But Thomas, he didn't judge, just offered me honest work for honest pay and treated me like a man." "You are a man," Caroline said softly. "A good one." Cole looked at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. The air between them felt suddenly charged, full of possibility. But then Cole looked away, cleared his throat, and changed the subject. Caroline tried not to feel disappointed. She knew nothing could happen between them, not really. She was still reeling from her broken engagement, and Cole was just being kind because he'd cared about her brother. But still, she couldn't help noticing the way her heart sped up when he smiled, or how safe she felt when he was near. On the 28th day since her arrival, Caroline took her ore samples into Hamilton to be assayed. Cole had wanted to come with her, but she'd insisted on going alone. This was something she needed to do herself. The town looked the same as it had a month ago, maybe a bit more worn down. The few remaining businesses had a desperate, clinging on quality. But the men loitering outside the saloon sat up straighter when they saw her riding Thomas's old mare into town, her split skirt dusty and her face tanned from working outdoors. Daniels emerged from the saloon, that oily smile already in place. "Miss Tucker, back to admit defeat." "Not quite, Mr. Daniels," Caroline said, dismounting. "I'm here to have my ore assayed." His smile faltered. "You've been working the mine. Every day for the past month with great success." A crowd was gathering now, the same men who'd bet against her looking suddenly uncertain. Caroline walked past them to the assayer's office, a tiny building squeezed between the general store and the closed-up bank. The assayer was an ancient man named Otto Schmidt, who'd been evaluating ore since before Nevada was even a state. He examined Caroline's samples with meticulous care, running tests with various chemicals and tools while Caroline waited, her heart pounding. Finally, Otto looked up, his rheumy eyes sharp. "Where did you get this ore, Miss Tucker?" "From my brother's claim." "Your brother was sitting on a fortune," Otto said flatly. "This is high-grade stuff, some of the best I've seen come out of Hamilton in years. You've got at least 60% pure silver here, maybe higher." Caroline felt dizzy with relief and vindication. "Can you put that in writing?" Otto wrote out an official assay certificate while Caroline paid his fee with some of the last money she had to her name. When she emerged from the office, Daniels was waiting, his face red and his eyes hard. "Let me see that," he demanded. Caroline handed him the certificate. She watched his expression darken as he read Otto's findings. "This doesn't mean anything," Daniels said. "One good sample doesn't prove the whole mine is viable. You still can't work it alone. You'll need equipment, workers, capital." "I'll manage," Caroline said. "I'll give you $500 for the claim right now," Daniels said. "More than fair, considering." "The claim is not for sale, Mr. Daniels, and I believe you owe me $100. It's been a month and I'm still here." Daniels's face went from red to purple. "The bet was you wouldn't last a month. You've just barely made it. Let's see if you can make it 2 months or 6. Let's see if you can survive your first winter out here." "I'll survive just fine," Caroline said. She was aware of the watching crowd, the men who'd bet against her now muttering among themselves. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." She turned to leave, but Daniels grabbed her arm hard enough to hurt. "You listen to me, girl. That mine should be mine. Your brother had no right to that silver." "Let go of me," Caroline said, her voice low and dangerous. "Or what? You going to scream? There's no law here, sweetheart, just me and the men I pay." Suddenly Daniels was jerked backward, and Cole was there, his fist connecting with Daniels's jaw hard enough to send the older man sprawling in the dust. Cole stood over him, breathing hard, his hands still clenched. "The lady said let go," Cole said. Daniels scrambled to his feet, blood trickling from his split lip. "You'll regret that, Miller. Both of you will regret this." "I already regret not hitting you harder," Cole said. He took Caroline's arm gently, exactly where Daniels had grabbed it, and led her away. They rode back to the claim in silence, Cole on his own horse beside her. Caroline's arm throbbed where Daniels had grabbed her, and she knew there would be bruises. But more than that, her mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. "Thank you," she said finally as they neared her cabin, "for helping me back there." "He shouldn't have touched you," Cole said, his voice still tight with anger. "No man should put hands on a woman like that. You could get in trouble. He said he'd make us regret it." "Let him try," Cole said. He pulled his horse to a stop beside hers. "Caroline, there's something I need to say." Her heart started pounding again, but for a different reason now. "What is it?" Cole took off his hat, running his hand through his hair in what Caroline had learned was a gesture of nervousness. "I know it's not proper and I know the timing's all wrong, but I can't keep pretending. I care about you. More than I should, more than I plan to. These past few weeks, working alongside you, watching you refuse to give up, seeing how strong and brave you are, I just can't help the way I feel." Caroline's breath caught. "Cole, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I know you've been through something bad back in San Francisco, something that sent you running out here. And I know I'm just a rancher with 20 head of cattle and more calluses than prospects. But I'm honest and I work hard and I think maybe I could make you happy, given the chance." "I was engaged," Caroline said, the words tumbling out, "to a man named Richard Harrington. He courted me for 6 months, asked for my hand, and I said yes. Then I discovered he already had a wife and 3 children in Sacramento. I was going to be his mistress, not his bride, and he thought I'd just accept that because he had money and I didn't." Cole's expression darkened. "He sounds like a piece of work. I broke it off, but the scandal ruined me. Everyone in our social circle knew within days. I lost my job at the dress shop because the owner said I was bad for business. That's why I had to come here. I had nowhere else to go." "I'm sorry that happened to you," Cole said, "but I'm not sorry you came here. That makes me selfish, I suppose." Caroline looked at this good, honest man who'd helped her without expecting anything in return, who taught her to swing a hammer and drill rock and believe in herself again. She thought about how right it felt to sit across from him at dinner, how safe she felt knowing he was just a mile away, how her heart lifted every time she saw him riding up to her cabin. "I care about you too," she said quietly. "I've been trying not to, telling myself it was too soon, that I needed to focus on the mine and winning that bet. But I do. I care about you very much." Cole's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from handsome to beautiful. "Yeah, yeah," Caroline said, smiling back. He dismounted and came to help her down from her horse, but instead of setting her on the ground, he held her there, his hands on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. They were close enough that Caroline could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath. "I'd very much like to kiss you," Cole said, "if that would be all right." In answer, Caroline leaned down and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative. But then Cole's arms tightened around her and Caroline's fingers tangled in his hair, and it deepened into something that made her toes curl in her boots. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks." "Why didn't you?" "Didn't think I had the right. You're a lady and I'm just a cowboy rancher trying to scrape by." "You're the best man I've ever known," Caroline said firmly. "Don't sell yourself short." They spent the evening together, talking and laughing and stealing kisses like teenagers. For the first time since Thomas's death, Caroline felt something other than grief and determination. She felt joy and hope and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility of love. But 3 nights later, Caroline woke to the smell of smoke. She bolted out of bed, heart racing, and threw open the cabin door. Orange light flickered against the darkness, and with horror, she realized the mine entrance was on fire. Someone had set the support timbers ablaze. She ran toward the mine in her nightgown, grabbing the water bucket as she went, but it was hopeless. The fire had already engulfed the entrance, and as she watched, the burning timbers collapsed inward, sealing the mine shaft with tons of burning wood and rock. "No!" Caroline screamed, throwing the pathetic bucket of water uselessly at the inferno. "No, no, no!" She heard hoofbeats and turned to see riders silhouetted against the flames. Even in the darkness, she recognized Daniels's bulky form. "Such a shame," Daniels called out. "Terrible accident, these mine fires. Happens all the time. Of course, without a working mine that claims worthless now, might as well sell to me and cut your losses." "You did this," Caroline shouted. "You murdered my brother and now you're destroying his mine." "Careful with those accusations, Miss Tucker. You got no proof of anything except that your mine just burned up. Makes you wonder though, doesn't it? What else might catch fire? That little cabin of yours, maybe, or Cole Miller's ranch house. Terrible things, accidents." The threat was clear. Caroline stood frozen as Daniels and his men rode away, their laughter echoing in the night. She sank to her knees in the dirt, watching everything Thomas had worked for go up in flames. That's how Cole found her 20 minutes later, still kneeling in her nightgown, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. He pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed. "He did this," she choked out. "Daniels. He threatened to burn down my cabin too and your ranch." Cole's arms tightened around her. "Did you see him set the fire?" "No, but he was here. He as good as admitted it." "Then we fight back," Cole said grimly. "But smart, not stupid. Come on, you're freezing." He carried her back to the cabin and wrapped her in blankets while he built up the fire in the stove. Caroline's teeth were chattering, but she wasn't sure if it was from cold or shock or rage. "I can't keep fighting him," she said dully. "He'll just destroy everything I care about." "Everything you care about. I should just take whatever he offers and leave before someone else gets hurt." "Is that what you want?" Cole asked, kneeling in front of her. "No, but I don't see another choice." There's always another choice, Cole said. He took her cold hands in his warm ones. Caroline, marry me. She stared at him. What? Marry me? If you're my wife, Daniels can't push you around so easy, and two people working together are stronger than one. We pool our resources, my ranch and your mine. We rebuild together. We're stronger together. Cole, you can't want to marry me just to help me fight Daniels. That's not a reason to get married. That's not why I want to marry you, Cole said. I want to marry you because I love you. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a month, but I loved you before the fire, and I'll love you after. The fight with Daniels just makes it more urgent, that's all. Caroline looked into his honest face, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and felt something settle in her chest. I love you too, but marriage is forever. We can't rush into it because we're angry. Then don't think of it as rushing, Cole said. Think of it as refusing to let that bastard control our lives. We were headed here anyway, you and me. This just speeds up the timeline. Caroline thought about her failed engagement, about Richard's lies and the humiliation that had followed. Then she thought about Cole's steady presence, his kindness, his strength, the way he'd never once lied to her or tried to be anything but exactly who he was. Ask me properly, she said. Cole's face broke into that transformative smile. He shifted so he was properly on one knee, still holding her hands. Caroline Tucker, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Yes, Caroline said. Yes, I'll marry you. Cole kissed her, and despite the burned mine and the threats and the uncertainty of their future, Caroline felt something very much like happiness blooming in her chest. They rode into Hamilton the next morning together, both mounted on horseback, both armed with rifles Cole had taught Caroline to shoot over the past weeks. Word had already spread about the mine fire, and the townspeople watched with open curiosity as Caroline and Cole dismounted in front of the general store. The store's proprietor, a weathered woman named Martha who'd always been kind to Caroline, looked up from her counter. Miss Tucker. I was sorry to hear about your trouble. Thank you, Martha. I need to purchase a few things, but first, I was hoping you might know where we could find someone to perform a marriage ceremony. Martha's eyebrows shot up. A marriage? You two getting hitched? We are, Cole said, putting his arm around Caroline's shoulders. Today, if possible. Within an hour, the whole town knew. Daniels emerged from his saloon, his face thunderous. This is mighty convenient, this sudden engagement. Funny you should mention convenience, Caroline said sweetly. Right after you threatened me and my mind burned down. That was quite convenient too. You saying I had something to do with that fire. I'm saying the timing is interesting, but that's all in the past now. Cole and I are getting married, and then we'll be rebuilding the mine together. Unless you'd like to confess to arson right here in front of all these witnesses. Daniels's face purpled, but he couldn't say anything without incriminating himself. He stormed back into the saloon, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Martha, it turned out, had a cousin who was a circuit preacher currently staying in Hamilton. By mid-afternoon, Caroline stood in Martha's parlor in her best dress, holding a bouquet of sage and desert flowers, while Preacher Morrison recited the marriage vows. Cole had cleaned up for the occasion, shaving and wearing what was clearly his only good shirt. He looked nervous and young and completely sincere as he promised to love and cherish Caroline for the rest of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them married, Cole kissed Caroline with such tenderness that Martha dabbed at her eyes with her apron. A small crowd had gathered, more out of curiosity than goodwill, but Caroline didn't care. She was married to a good man who loved her, and together they would find a way forward. That night, in Cole's ranch house, which was larger and sturdier than Caroline's cabin, They consummated their marriage with a mix of nervousness and passion that left them both breathless and laughing. Caroline had been terrified, given her limited knowledge of marital relations, but Cole was patient and gentle, and by the end, she understood what all the fuss was about. "I love you," Cole whispered into her hair as they lay tangled together afterward. "I know this all happened fast, but I don't regret a single moment." "Neither do I," Caroline said, and she meant it. Over the next week, they began the work of rebuilding. Cole had some savings put aside, and Caroline still had the silver ore she'd extracted before the fire. They sold it to an assayer in Carson City for enough money to hire 2 workers and buy timber to shore up the mine entrance. Digging out the collapsed tunnel was backbreaking work. They had to carefully remove tons of burned wood and rock, shore up the damaged sections, and hope that the fire hadn't destabilized the whole thing. Cole worked alongside the hired men, and Caroline helped however she could, hauling water and supplies and keeping everyone fed. Daniels watched from a distance, and Caroline could feel his malevolence like a physical thing. But he didn't make any more overt moves, probably because attacking a married couple was different than harassing a lone woman. Caroline and Cole were careful to never be alone outside, to always have witnesses, to make it clear they wouldn't be easy targets. 2 weeks after the wedding, they broke through to the undamaged section of the mine. The silver vein was still there, glittering in the lamplight, untouched by the fire. "We did it," Caroline breathed, staring at the precious metal. Cole pulled her into his arms, both of them filthy and exhausted. "You did it. You didn't let him win." They worked the mine carefully but steadily over the next months. The silver was as rich as Otto's assay had suggested, and within 2 months, they'd extracted enough ore to pay off their debts and start making a real profit. Cole hired more workers, and Caroline managed the books and the supplies, her seamstress background serving her well in organization and detail work. Winter came, harsh and cold, but the cabin and ranch house were weatherproof, and they had plenty of food stored away. Caroline had taken to ranch life with the same determination she'd shown with mining, learning to care for the cattle and chickens, to preserve food and make soap, and all the other skills frontier life required. She and Cole grew closer with each passing day, their initial attraction deepening into the kind of love that came from truly knowing another person. They learned each other's habits and quirks, had their first fights and their first making-ups, built a life together from shared work and shared dreams. In the spring, Caroline realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with terror and joy in equal measure. Cole's reaction was pure, unfiltered happiness. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, already making plans for a cradle he'd build and additions to the house. The pregnancy was difficult. Caroline was sick constantly in the early months, and the physical work she'd been doing became impossible as she grew larger. But the mine was profitable now, they had reliable workers, and she could afford to step back from the manual labor. Daniels had grown quieter as their success became undeniable. His saloon was struggling as more people left Hamilton for better prospects elsewhere. Caroline felt no sympathy for him, but she also stopped looking over her shoulder quite so often, stopped jumping at every unexpected sound. Then, 7 months into her pregnancy, everything changed. Caroline was in Hamilton picking up supplies when she overheard 2 men talking outside the assayer's office. "Found him dead this morning. Looks like he fell down the stairs drunk, broke his neck. Daniels, dead as a doornail. Couldn't have happened to a more deserving fellow, you ask me." Caroline felt an odd mix of emotions. Relief, certainly. She'd be lying if she denied that, but also a strange sadness. Daniels had been consumed by greed to the point of murder, and what had it gotten him? A lonely death in a dying town. She told Cole that evening as they sat together on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and purple. "He's really gone," Cole said wonderingly. "We don't have to worry about him anymore." "We never did, not really," Caroline said. "He couldn't touch what we built together." Cole rested his hand on her swollen belly where their child moved beneath the skin. "No, he couldn't. We beat him just by refusing to give up." 2 months later, on a warm June morning in 1876, Caroline gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after her brother, and James, after Cole's father. The baby had Cole's brown eyes and a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. Martha came out to help with the birth and stayed on for a week to teach Caroline the basics of infant care. Cole was a natural father, patient and gentle with his tiny son, content to walk the floor for hours when Thomas was fussy. "He looks like you," Caroline said one night, watching Cole cradle their sleeping son. "Poor kid," Cole joked. "I was hoping he'd get your looks." "I think he's perfect," Caroline said. Over the next years, their family grew. A daughter named Margaret came 2 years after Thomas, followed by twin boys, Samuel and Daniel, 2 years after that. The house expanded with each child, and the mine continued to produce well, making them genuinely prosperous. Hamilton never did revive, but Cole and Caroline didn't need it to. They had everything they needed right there on their combined property. The mine, the ranch, their growing family, and each other. Caroline often thought about that first day she'd stepped off the stagecoach, terrified and alone, facing a town full of hostile strangers and a bet she'd had no idea how to win. She thought about Cole's kindness, his steady presence, the way he'd helped her without expecting anything in return. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caroline and Cole stood together in the cemetery on the hill at Thomas's grave. The headstone was marble now, bought with silver money, and it read, "Thomas Tucker, beloved brother, honest man, visionary." "He'd be proud of you," Cole said, his arm around her waist. "He'd be proud of us," Caroline corrected. "None of this would have happened without you." "Funny how things work out," Cole said. "They bet you wouldn't last a month. I made sure you stayed forever." Caroline smiled, leaning into her husband's warmth. "Best bet I ever made." Their children were playing in the wildflowers that grew near the cemetery in spring, their laughter carrying on the desert wind. Thomas, now 9, was teaching Margaret how to identify different types of rocks. The twins were chasing butterflies, their identical faces lit with joy. "Ready to head home?" Cole asked. Caroline took one last look at her brother's grave, sending up a silent thank you for the gift he'd unknowingly given her. By leaving her the mine, Thomas had led her to Nevada, to Hamilton, to Cole, to this life that she never could have imagined in her old life in San Francisco. "Ready," she said. They walked back to the wagon hand in hand, gathering their children as they went. The mine was still producing, the ranch was thriving, and after all the hardship and struggle, they'd built something lasting and true. That evening, after the children were in bed, Caroline and Cole sat on their porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The desert night was cool and peaceful, broken only by the occasional call of an owl or the distant yip of coyotes. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked, his arm around her shoulders. "About how different my life could have been," Caroline said. "If Thomas hadn't died, if I hadn't taken that bet, if you hadn't been kind to a stranger. I think we would have found each other anyway," Cole said. "Some things are just meant to be." Caroline smiled and kissed him, still feeling that flutter in her chest that had been there from the beginning and never faded. "I love you, Cowboy." "I love you too," Cole said. Forever. And as promises went, it was one he kept. They grew old together on their Nevada ranch, watching their children grow and have children of their own. The mine eventually played out as all mines do, but by then it didn't matter. They'd built a legacy that went beyond silver or land or money. They'd built a family, a home, a life together. And on a cool October morning when they were both in their 70s, Cole and Caroline sat on that same porch swing, holding hands and watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played. No regrets. Cole asked, his voice rougher now with age but still warm. Not a single one, Caroline said truthfully. Just that I didn't kiss you sooner, Cole said with a grin. Caroline laughed, the sound still bright despite the years. You made up for it. That I did, Cole agreed. When Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, Caroline grieved deeply, but without bitterness. They'd had 53 good years together, far more than most couples got. She followed him 2 years later, and they were buried side by side in that cemetery on the hill, not far from her brother Thomas. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood at the funeral, along with what remained of Hamilton's original residents. The town itself was mostly abandoned now, a ghost town slowly being reclaimed by the desert. But the Miller Ranch still stood, passed down through the generations, a testament to what determination and love could build. And on their shared headstone, beneath their names and dates, someone had carved, "She stayed. He loved. Together they thrived." It was, Caroline would have said, the perfect epitaph. The end of their story was really just the beginning of the legacy they left behind. Their children remembered a home full of love and laughter, where hard work was valued, but family came first. Their grandchildren heard stories about the brave grandmother who'd bet she could survive in the wild Nevada desert, and the devoted grandfather who taught her how to thrive there. The silver mine that had brought them together was long since exhausted and sealed up for safety, but the ranch continued on. Each generation added something new. Better irrigation for crops, modern conveniences as they became available, but always maintaining the core of what Cole and Caroline had built together. On what would have been their 60th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a reunion. More than 50 people came, all descended from Caroline and Cole, each one carrying a piece of their love story forward into the future. The eldest grandson, Thomas James Miller, now a silver-haired man of 55, stood on the porch where his grandparents had spent so many evenings and raised a glass. "To Caroline and Cole," he said, "who proved that the best bets are the ones you make on love." "To Caroline and Cole," the family chorused, their voices carrying across the desert that had witnessed the beginning of it all. And if the wind seemed to carry an echo of laughter, warm and familiar, well, that was just the desert playing tricks. Or maybe it was two souls, forever intertwined, forever home in the land they'd claimed together. Either way, it was a happy ending. The kind that lasts forever.